welcome back to Project Hardway. In my last video, I know I said we were going to put the engine in the car, but there were a few last minute items that needed to be taken care of before we could get to that. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the rear end, see what kind of rear end it's got in it and what the gear ratio is. Then I'm going to Frankenstein a steering shaft together to fit the steering box that I bought for a different car and put on this one. Check it out. Oh, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel. There she is in the light of day for so long in hiding. So, while the engine is ready for Virginia, at least in my opinion, Virginia is not ready for the engine. It's been painted down here on the frame rails and the firewall before. Everything's a little dirty, so I'm going to give it a quick and dirty pressure wash and maybe touch up some paint on a couple of these spots. Give that time to dry. Also, the bay in there's a mess from when I took the engine and transmission out. So while the car is out here, I'm gonna take some time to clean up that bay. Hopefully, because there's no weather stripping or anything in the car right now, that doesn't turn into something. So I better get to work. All right, here we go. I said, here we go. One more time, here we go. Nope. Here we go. Yeah.
My money don't jiggle, it folds. I'd like to see you wiggle, for sure.
As soon as I started hitting the frame rails and stuff with the pressure washer, a whole lot of that paint started flaking off. Right there you see it. So if I had to guess, the engine bay, the frame rails, all that stuff were painted the same way that the water pump, the timing cover, and the harmonic balancer were painted poorly. So I'll scuff all this stuff up a little bit and I may end up going through and doing a lot more touch-up paint than I thought I would, but hopefully I'll have it all back black before I set the engine down in there. All right, well, thunderstorms are rolling in. I don't want to drape a tarp across my car, so I've hastily swept the floor where the car sits. And now I'm going to try to push this thing up the gravel there. That's not flat. I promise you it's not flat. I'm going to try to push the car up there by myself and get her back in. Oh boy. Here we go. Nope. If you haven't already figured out what I'm doing here, you're gonna learn today. That's what I have to do. Big lightning. You gotta do what you gotta do, right? Nothing wrong with the bumper there. And I like to think that my horns here stayed in good shape. Yeah. Good as gold, baby. Good as gold. And not a moment too soon because it's about to let loose out there. Now we've got the touch-up paint done on the frame rails. Good enough to my liking. One thing I also did was I bought this really nice brand new Layers power steering gear. The problem is this car had your classic F-body problem where you'd be going down the road holding the wheel one way, then you'd take a turn, it'd go back to center, and you'd be holding the wheel the other way. So what I did is I ordered a close ratio 10-to-1 steering box. That thing is 2.5 turns from lock to lock. We're talking 1, 2, done. So that's gonna be really nice out there on the street. But right now, hold on. There's a problem with this. And I'm gonna get to it in a second. But right now I've got the back end of the car up on the ground because when I bought the car, I jacked up the rear end and I hit the wheels and it felt like it at least had a mini spool or something in it. Let's see, I'll show you. So when I turn this wheel, that wheel immediately goes the same direction. I don't know if the camera's picking that up too well, but trust me, it's moving whichever way I move this wheel. The reason I'm looking at this is one, I don't know what gear ratios in this car, and two, one morning I might have had a couple of drinks and did a brake stand in the garage here, and it went all YOLO on me. That is, you only left one. Only one wheel was spinning. So I'm going to pop the cover off, drain the fluid out of it, and we're going to count the teeth on the ring and pinion to find out what the gear ratio is, and I'm going to see just what's going on inside the diff housing to get the wheels turning one way or the other. It may just be an actual limited slip diff that is a little tired and worn out, but we'll see when we get in there. Last one. Somewhere that'll get a little bite, start to pry off there. Ooh, yeah. Wish you had smell-o-vision. If you've never gotten into a diff casing before, diff fluid is right up there, at or close to the top of the list of just some of the foulest smelling fluids on your car. All right, what we got here? So I automatically see a spring in there, so it is a limited slip diff. See that there? That thing does things with stuff inside there, and then they go together and do other things, and clutches and pressure, and both wheels spin. So I'm gonna try and count these teeth on this stuff here and see where we're at. In there is a white dot. Oh, well, might be more than one. I'm gonna look for a marking on the pinion, and that'll be my reference point to start and stop. And I'll count the teeth on the pinion, and then we'll move to counting the teeth on the ring gear. All right, so we've got 11 teeth on the pinion. See if I can find something on this ring gear. Oh, that says Richmond on it, which means that this is a decent gear set. Means they also may have a marking on it that tells me what the gear ratio is without having to do math. What's that? Something's been scratched and scribbled here. Using your eyeballs for small ones, okay, but sometimes you want to keep your place with your finger on the big ones. I counted 42, but I feel like I miscounted, so do it again. Measure twice, right? 41. I feel like I should know that gear ratio off the top of my head, but I don't. But essentially, you would take 41 and divide it by 11. That would get you, it's somewhere in the threes. I'm willing to bet that's a 373 diff. All right, so just as I figured, it is a 373 diff, which, I mean, that's your go-to. That's your hot rod gear. That's been the one for decades. But I am going to say I'm a little bit disappointed because I felt like it was somewhere in the fours because I could put this thing in fourth gear in the neighborhood. But, oh well, at least I'm not trying to daily drive it. You know, we're not going for fuel mileage here. We'll try to keep it off the interstates for too long. But anyway, back to what I was talking about with the steering box. The problem with it is that I ordered a steering box for a 71 Camaro with a big block. And in mid 1978, GM switched the Camaros to a box that uses a smaller input shaft. So this is a 13/16 input shaft. And I can't remember off the top of my head which one mine uses, but essentially the one that's on there now is a 36 spline 13/16, and I can't find a steering shaft that'll work. See, when they made that switch to the smaller input shaft, they also made the end of the shaft, the steering shaft, smaller. This is like the center of these bolt holes is 1 3/4 inch apart. I'm gonna need one that's bigger. So this is a, there it is. I think this is a Layers 205. This is the one that I had on the car. This is a overall diameter of 2 3/4 inches. I'm gonna need one like this that's bigger, but this isn't the right size either. But they don't make one that's got 13/16 36 spline that will fit onto this smaller bit here. So you see, I've already got my shaft separated here. So the other thing is I can't just go rip another shaft out of a car, because they also use a clamp style on the bottom of the column for the older ones. And with that change in mid 78, this goes onto the end of the steering shaft, and then a center bolt goes through and clamps that on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the junkyard and I'm gonna find a truck shaft that takes one of these bigger couplers. I'm gonna buy that and bring it home. I'm gonna rip it apart and I'm gonna Frankenstein a steering shaft. Now I could try to find a U-joint or try to buy an aftermarket one, but those are money, for one, and two, those ones that you get the U-joint for, you gotta like weld those on. I am not a welder. I have a welder, but I am not a welder, and I'm not about to trust my skill set to keep me in control of my car, especially when we plan on beating on her real good. So junkyard parts and Frankensteining it is. So I'm gonna load up my tools here, get all that stuff ready to go, head off to the junkyard, jump in the pig there, and see what I can come up with. All right, so I'm out here at the junkyard, and I was gonna head right to the trucks, but I look down the aisles here, and what do I see? The face of the infamous Astro Chevy van staring right at me. And if you're an S10 guy, you know what I want off of this. That steering shaft right there. No rag joints there, all U-joints. I'm gonna pop that bad boy off. All right, so after struggling with this thing for like half an hour to get it off of there, it finally got off. The problem is at first the bolt that goes into the steering gear was tighter than the tolerances on a NASCAR engine's piston to cylinder head clearance. And then there's no room to work in down here. And as you can see by the deposits left, it's very, very rusty. So I got it eventually. So now on to what we came here for. All right, we're out of the junkyard, back in the pig, back on the road. Got that steering shaft off the Astro van. That was pretty sick. That's gonna be for the S10. It's too bad those don't fit the application for the Camaro. However, my trip was almost in vain because I didn't do my homework before I went. I figured the trucks would have the bigger diameter rag joint on them. They don't. They're the same size. There's not a lot of old cars in the junkyard like there used to be, you know? So I did some digging around, I did some walking around, and I just so happened to come across a very, very knackered old 73 Firebird. And it had the steering shaft still on it. It was a larger diameter like I needed. So I fought with that thing quite a bit, got it out of there. The steering column on it was locked. I couldn't get to the bolt for the upper part of the shaft, so what I did was I separated the rag joint from the steering gearbox and then hammered it apart right there. So now all I've got to do is clean this one up, put a new joint on it, and slap it onto the other half of the Camaro shaft that I've already separated. So Now I need to get, what do I need to get? I guess I need to get a steering coupler, don't I? And then I'll also need to be going about getting the pitman arm swapped off of the old steering box onto the new one, put the steering column back in, and I'm gonna need a 26 spline clutch alignment tool because we're getting ready to put the engine back in the car. You see me here, I've got my old power steering gear in the vise. You know that I know that I probably should have done this on the car. That's all we're gonna say about it. Also, I don't have a socket big enough to fit the nut on the pitman arm, so won't be any impact involved here. I got my crescent and a cheater. Watch, I'm gonna rip it right out of the vise. Oh, yep, what did I tell you? If this doesn't work, I won't be surprised. Essentially, it's gonna turn until it won't anymore. And then I'll just, I might already be there. Oh gosh, oh. Idiot. There it goes. Should have just done that all along. You know, your boy could be on the way to the emergency room right now with a couple of toes missing. I just, don't be stupid, kids. This is a pitman arm puller. I rented this from AutoZone for less than $20. I would have gotten it from the O'Reillys up the road from me, but the closest one that any O'Reillys had was halfway across the county. So, AutoZone it is. Now I'm gonna just zing this bad boy down, and while I do that, the jaws here are gonna grab the edge of the pitman arm and pull it off the stub. Now I'll clean that up a little bit and slap it on the new one that's already on the car. This is the part of my steering shaft that goes into the bottom of the column, pre-separated. I've had this in the freezer because there are tight tolerances on these shafts. So this one is a little shrunk up, and the new one is sitting about room temperature, which means that it should go onto this easier. I've also greased the shaft. And then there is a little curved spring here that fits inside of a slot. That helps kind of keep everything from coming completely apart if you were to start pulling on it in the car. I've still got the old rag joint on there because one, I don't have a new one yet, and two, if inaccurate, it's okay. I'm not too concerned about that. So, let's see. Yep. Gonna take some force. Watch, I'll knock it right out of the vise. Make sure I don't start to cover up that slot. I gotta make sure that once I get down there, I put that curved little spring in there so that, you know, I don't cover it. I could have also torched this. That's how I got it apart in the first place. Use the torch just to kind of stretch that outer sleeve. All right, we'll put the old thumb right here in harm's way. And then drive her home. Voila, one steering shaft that will work for my car. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Thanks for checking in on Virginia's progress. That car is now ready for the engine to be dropped back in and even fired up and run. So, join me for the next video when we make that happen. Remember, sometimes you gotta do things the hard way, guys.